Imagine commanding the most powerful army on Earth, hundreds of thousands of soldiers, endless supplies, absolute confidence. You are the master of Europe, a military genius whose name strikes fear into kings and emperors. Victory seems inevitable, but then, within months, it's gone. Frozen, starving, retreating in chaos, your unstoppable force is reduced to a column of ghosts. The dream of total victory becomes a nightmare of annihilation. Today, we're diving into history's greatest military disasters. Moments when overconfidence, poor planning, and human error brought empires to their knees. These aren't just stories of defeat, they're warnings about the fragility of power and the cost of hubris. In 1812, Napoleon Bonaparte, at the height of his power, assembled the largest army Europe had ever witnessed, over 600,000 men drawn from across his vast empire. This formidable force, known as the Grande Armée, was a symbol of French military might and Napoleon's ambition. Their goal was clear: to invade Russia and force Tsar Alexander III to submit to French dominance. Expecting a swift and decisive victory, Napoleon was instead confronted by a cunning Russian strategy. The Russian army retreated steadily, refusing to give battle, and implemented a brutal scorched-earth policy. Villages and crops were set ablaze, wells poisoned, and supplies destroyed. The land itself became a weapon, denying the French the resources they desperately needed. As the Grande Armée advanced deeper into the vast, unforgiving Russian landscape, they found only ashes, disease, and exhaustion. The soldiers, already far from home, faced hunger and thirst, their morale steadily eroding. The endless marches through barren fields and burned-out villages took a heavy toll, and sickness began to spread among the ranks. At Borodino, the French finally met the Russians in a ferocious and bloody battle. Napoleon claimed victory, but it was a hollow one. Tens of thousands lay dead or wounded, and the Russian army managed to slip away under cover of darkness, preserving their strength for the battles yet to come. When Napoleon reached Moscow, he expected a triumphant entry and a quick peace. Instead, he found the city deserted, its streets eerily empty. Soon after, fires broke out across Moscow, set by its own citizens to deny the French any shelter or supplies. The city burned for days, leaving Napoleon with nothing but ruins. With winter fast approaching and no peace offer from the Tsar, Napoleon hesitated, hoping for negotiations that never came. Finally, he ordered a retreat, but by then, it was too late. The first snows began to fall, and the temperature plummeted. The infamous Russian winter struck with full force. Ill-prepared for the freezing cold, French soldiers froze in their sleep, starved for lack of food, and watched as discipline and order collapsed. Horses died by the thousands, and men struggled to survive each bitter night. As the retreating army staggered westward, Russian Cossacks and partisans relentlessly harried their flanks, attacking stragglers and supply wagons. The crossing of the Berezina River became a desperate, chaotic scene. Under fire, men drowned or were trampled in the icy waters, and thousands perished in the confusion. Of the 600,000 who had marched into Russia, fewer than 100,000 made it back. The survivors were broken in body and spirit, many never to fight again. The once mighty Grande Armée was reduced to a shadow of its former self. Napoleon's overconfidence and the immense logistical challenges of supplying such a vast army in hostile territory collided with the Russian strategy of attrition and the merciless climate. The French supply lines stretched thin, and wagons became mired in mud and snow, leaving troops without food or ammunition. The myth of Napoleon's invincibility was shattered on the frozen plains of Russia. The Grande Armée, once the terror of Europe, was lost to the snow, its banners and eagles abandoned in the ice. The Russian campaign became a graveyard for an empire, a stark warning that even the greatest armies can be undone by arrogance, miscalculation, and the unforgiving forces of nature. The echoes of this disaster would haunt Europe for years to come. The Crimean War, 1854. Europe was embroiled in a brutal conflict, with Britain, France, and the Ottoman Empire facing off against Russia. The windswept Crimean Peninsula became the stage for one of history's most tragic military blunders. At Balaclava, a single miscommunication would send the British Light Brigade into legend and disaster. The morning was tense, the air thick with anticipation and uncertainty as orders were relayed across the lines. Ordered to prevent Russians from removing captured guns, the cavalry received a vague command: The message, hastily delivered and poorly explained, left officers confused about their true objective. Confusion reigned. From their position, the only visible guns were a mile away, defended by Russian artillery. The intended target was unclear, but the pressure to act was immense. Despite doubts, the order was obeyed. The men trusted their leaders, believing in the honor of their regiment and the necessity of duty. 670 men charged down a valley flanked by enemy cannons. The ground shook beneath them as they rode into the jaws of death, banners flying and sabers drawn. The valley erupted in fire. Russian guns unleashed a storm of shot and shell, filling the air with smoke, chaos, and the deafening roar of battle. Men and horses fell, but the brigade pressed on, discipline and courage in the face of certain death. Each rider knew the odds, yet none faltered, their resolve unbroken even as comrades fell beside them. They reached the guns, but were too few and surrounded. The fighting was fierce and desperate, but the Russian defenders quickly overwhelmed the survivors. The retreat was as deadly as the advance. Over 270 casualties, nearly 500 horses lost. The brigade was shattered. Survivors staggered back, haunted by the carnage and the futility of their sacrifice. The charge became a symbol of valor and the fatal cost of blind obedience. Lord Cardigan, who led the charge, survived, but the price paid by his men was devastating. Tennyson's poem immortalized their bravery, but the real lesson was clear. Communication failures and rigid hierarchy can be as deadly as any enemy. The world mourned their courage, but also questioned the leadership that sent them to their doom. The tragedy was not a lack of courage, but a system that valued obedience over common sense. The men of the Light Brigade became heroes, but their sacrifice was a stark warning about the dangers of unclear orders and unquestioning loyalty. The Light Brigade's ride remains a cautionary tale of command gone wrong, a reminder that true leadership demands clarity, responsibility, and above all, humanity. The year is 1942. The world is engulfed in the flames of the Second World War, and on the vast, frozen Eastern Front, a new chapter of unimaginable brutality is about to unfold. Hitler's armies, hungry for oil and desperate for a decisive blow, turned their sights toward Stalingrad, a city whose name alone carried immense symbolic weight. The German advance was relentless, their tanks and troops surging eastward, determined to seize the oil fields beyond and cripple the Soviet war machine. The Luftwaffe rained fire from above, reducing Stalingrad to a smoldering wasteland. Yet, the Soviets refused to break. Every shattered building, every pile of bricks became a fortress. Soldiers and civilians alike fought for every street, every room, in a savage struggle the Germans called the Rat War, a battle fought at point-blank range, day and night, with no respite. The Germans pressed forward, inch by bloody inch, but the Soviets clung to the banks of the Volga River. They would not yield, holding on with grim determination, knowing that the fate of their nation hung in the balance. As the German Sixth Army bled in the ruins, Soviet reserves gathered in secret on the frozen steppes. Reinforcements poured in, preparing for a counterstrike that would change the course of the war. In November, the Soviets unleashed Operation Uranus. Their armies swept around the flanks, encircling more than 250,000 German soldiers. The hunters had become the hunted, trapped in a tightening noose of steel and snow. Panic and confusion spread among the Germans. The once mighty invaders now found themselves surrounded, cut off from escape, as the harsh Russian winter closed in. Hitler, refusing to accept defeat, ordered his men to stand fast. He promised they would be supplied by air, but the Luftwaffe could not deliver enough food or ammunition. The promise was a cruel illusion. Supplies dwindled to nothing. The bitter cold became an enemy as deadly as the Soviets. Hunger gnawed at the trapped soldiers, and hope faded with each passing day. Starvation, frostbite, and despair consumed the men of the Sixth Army. Many froze to death in their trenches, while others succumbed to disease and exhaustion. One desperate diary entry reads, "We are freezing without food. My hands are frostbitten. I can see my comrades dying around me." These words echo the agony of thousands. A desperate attempt to break the encirclement failed. Relief columns were shattered by Soviet artillery, and the ring around Stalingrad only tightened. Field Marshal Paulus, promoted in a last-ditch effort to inspire resistance, was expected by Hitler to fight to the last man. But with no hope left, Paulus surrendered. defying Hitler's orders and sealing the fate of his army. Of nearly 300,000 German soldiers trapped in Stalingrad, only about 5,000 would ever see their homeland again. The rest perished in the ruins or in captivity. The Battle of Stalingrad shattered the myth of German invincibility. The city's ruins became a symbol of Soviet resilience and marked the turning point of World War II on the Eastern Front. It was a catastrophe born of arrogance, pride, and a refusal to face reality. A disaster that would haunt Hitler and the German High Command for the rest of the war. The name Stalingrad became synonymous with unimaginable suffering, defeat, and the horror of total war. Civilians and soldiers alike paid a terrible price. The lesson of Stalingrad is clear. Pride and obsession can doom even the mightiest armies, leaving only ruins and sorrow in their wake. 1991. Operation Desert Storm showcased high-tech warfare, stealth bombers, GPS, and rapid armored advances. But in the chaos of the desert, technology became a double-edged sword. Fast-moving units, poor visibility, and confusing terrain led to tragic friendly fire incidents. US A-10s, designed to destroy tanks, twice attacked British vehicles by mistake, killing 9 allies. Of 148 American combat deaths, 35 were from friendly fire. For the British, 9 of 47. The fog of war, amplified by technology, made friend indistinguishable from foe. The war spurred new systems like Blue Force Tracker, using GPS to prevent such tragedies. Desert Storm proved that as weapons become more precise, the risk of error changes, but never disappears. Information and communication are as vital as firepower. The greatest danger can come from within, and the cost of confusion is measured in lives. The quest to prevent fratricide became a central lesson for modern militaries. Military disasters echo through history, shaping nations and doctrines. Napoleon's retreat ended an empire. Balaclava forced Britain to rethink command. Stalingrad broke the Wehrmacht. Desert Storm exposed the perils of modern war. These aren't tales of cowardice, but of overconfidence, poor communication, and the refusal to face reality. The real tragedy? These lessons are often relearned, generation after generation. History offers the textbook, but every era thinks it's the exception. If you found these stories important, like and subscribe for more deep dives into the moments that shaped our world. And tell us in the comments, which military disaster should we cover next? Thanks for watching.